Welcome to our deep dive today.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be looking at 3 tracks from Doza Cruz's Fünf nach 12,
Okay.
and you describe these songs in really fascinating ways, like Tumanish Tirade
Mm-hmm.
as this like theatrical piece that kind of descends into this chaos,
Right.
and Hüppensett as this hard-rocking but melodic track,
Yeah.
then Airplane and Radio as like a dreamy, meditative soundscape.
Sounds like a good mix.
I know just from these descriptions, I'm curious like what kind of journey this album is going to take us on.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like an eclectic mix.
Yeah.
Which is always exciting when you have such a diverse sonic palette.
Right.
It just makes you wonder, like, what threads might tie these songs together. Is it a narrative? Is it a shared theme? Or is it purely just an exploration of, like, different musical styles?
Let's start with Tumanish Tirade, which
Yeah.
you described as a theatrical piece with some really interesting vocal work.
Yes, and the title itself, Tumanish Tirade, hints at something unique. Tirade obviously suggests, like, a rant or a speech.
Right.
But Tumanish,
Yeah.
that sounds almost like a made-up word, perhaps referring to a fictional place or concept.
And you mentioned it gets pretty chaotic.
Absolutely. The song starts with these dramatic shifts in vocal tones,
Okay.
creating this unsettling atmosphere.
Oh, wow.
And then it just builds and builds until it explodes into this frenzy of sound.
Oh, wow.
It's like listening to a descent into madness, but in a strangely captivating way.
Okay, so we have this theatrical, almost unsettling vibe and a title that hints at something fictional. I'm definitely hooked. What about the lyrics?
Yeah.
Do they shed any light on what this Tumanish Tirade is all about?
The lyrics are a fascinating mix of German and English phrases,
Okay.
which adds another layer of intrigue.
Yeah.
They mention Tomania, a place that doesn't actually exist.
Yep.
And there are references to a dictator figure named Eder Strabnitz
Okay.
and pronouncements about abolishing freedoms.
So it sounds like there's a political element to this song, maybe even a satirical one.
I think that's a safe bet. The lyrics also have these moments of absurdity,
Yeah.
like Der Wiener Schnitzel mit de Lavignetten and de Sauerkraut.
Okay.
It's a very specific and somewhat comical image to throw into a song about political control.
It's like they're using humor to highlight the ridiculousness of authoritarianism, right?
Exactly. And the chaotic energy of the music really amplifies that satirical edge.
Right.
As the song progresses, it becomes more and more frantic,
Mhm.
culminating in this frenzied repetition of "de Stücken," which I believe is referring to a German bomber plane.
Wow. So it goes from unsettling to full-blown chaotic. It sounds like Doza Crew is really using every element of the song, like the vocals, the music, the lyrics,
Yes.
to create this immersive experience that critiques power and control.
Absolutely. They're not just telling us a story, they're making us feel it,
Right.
pulling us into this strange and unsettling world that they've created.
And that makes me wonder about the listener's role in all of this.
Mm.
It's one thing to recognize the satire,
Right.
but does the song prompt any deeper reflection?
I think it does by presenting this exaggerated, almost absurd portrayal of a totalitarian regime.
Yeah.
The song forces us to consider the more subtle ways in which power operates in our own lives.
Oh, yeah.
It makes us question, are there moments where we blindly accept authority?
Right.
Or where our own freedoms are subtly eroded without us even noticing?
That's a really thought-provoking point.
Yeah.
So even though Tumanish Tirade is set in this fictional world of Tomania,
Right.
it has the potential to make us reflect on the dynamics of power in our own reality.
Precisely. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of great art. It can transport us to different worlds
Yeah.
while simultaneously illuminating truths about our own.
Well, I'm already eager to see where Doza Crew takes us next, especially since Hüppensett sounds like a complete departure musically.
Yes.
You described it as a hard-rocking melodic track.
It is quite a shift.
Yeah.
Gone is the theatrical chaos of Tumanish Tirade, replaced by a driving rhythm and catchy melodies that are almost impossible not to move to. But there's also a darker undercurrent to Hüppensett, both musically and lyrically.
Okay, so we have this energy and drive, but with a darker edge.
Yes.
And you mentioned lyrics.
Yes, and here's where the narrative thread from Tumanish Tirade might start to weave its way back in.
Okay.
Remember that phrase, Eder Strabnitz, the dictator figure from the first song?
Right.
Well, his name pops up again in Hüppensett, this time attached to the phrase Hüppensett,
Okay.
which seems to be some sort of chant or slogan.
So we're back in this world of Comania, but maybe from a different perspective.
Exactly. Instead of observing from a distance, Hüppensett plunges us directly into the heart of this society.
Okay.
The lyrics are filled with imagery of marching strength and nationalistic pride.
Oh, wow.
Lines like, Stürmt auf die Straße, wir marschieren an vorderster Front.
Okay.
And mit der Macht des Volkes, nichts kann uns mehr stoppen, create a powerful sense of unity and purpose.
It almost sounds like a rally cry, like a call to action.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But when you listen closely, there's
Yeah.
a disturbing element to this unity and purpose.
Uh-huh.
Lines like, Gebt uns die Kanonen, der Gürtel wurde enger, suggest that this nationalistic fervor is fueled by aggression
Right.
and a willingness to sacrifice for the greater good.
That's where that darker undercurrent you mentioned really comes into play. It's like they're showing us how easily a desire for belonging and strength can be manipulated into something dangerous.
And the music perfectly reinforces that.
Yeah.
It's so catchy and energetic that you can almost get swept up in the excitement of it all. It makes you feel the pull of that collective identity, even as the lyrics hint at the potential consequences.
It's a brilliant way to make us confront the complexities of group dynamics. It's not just about condemning blind obedience.
Right.
It's about understanding how easily we can be seduced by the allure of belonging, even when it comes at a cost.
Right. And that raises an important question for the listener.
Yeah.
Where do we draw the line between healthy patriotism and blind nationalism?
That's a good question.
When does a sense of belonging become dangerous?
That's a question I think we all need to be asking ourselves, especially in today's world.
Definitely.
So we've gone from the chaotic satire of Tomanish tirade to the almost hypnotic energy of Hüppensett. I'm really curious to see how Aeroplane and Radio, the final song you selected,
Yes.
fits into all of this. You mentioned it being quite meditative and dreamlike.
It's like a breath of fresh air after the intensity of the previous two tracks.
Oh.
Aeroplane and Radio strips away all the noise and bombast, inviting us to enter a space of quiet contemplation.
So a complete shift in tone and atmosphere. What about the lyrics?
Yeah.
Do they continue the narrative thread from the previous songs, or are we entering completely new territory?
Aeroplane and Radio definitely takes us in a different direction thematically.
Okay.
But it's not entirely disconnected from the previous songs instead of focusing on political systems or collective ideologies.
Yeah. Delves into more personal and universal themes, reflection, connection, and the human condition.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of lyrical imagery are we talking about here? What kind of mood does it evoke?
Well, one of the first lines that struck me was, Es tut mir leid, aber ich möchte nun mal kein Herrscher der Welt sein, das liegt mir nicht.
Okay.
There's a sense of humility there.
Yeah.
A rejection of the pursuit of power that
Yeah.
we saw so prominently in the previous songs.
It's like a complete 180 from the aggressive nationalism of Hüppensett instead of trying to conquer and control.
Yeah.
This song is about stepping back and acknowledging our limitations.
Exactly. And the song goes on to explore the role of technology.
Okay.
In shaping human connection, the line, Aeroplane und Radio haben uns einander näher gebracht,
Okay.
acknowledges how these inventions have bridged vast distances,
Right.
bringing people closer together.
So there's a sense of optimism there, a recognition of the positive potential of technology. Yes, but it's not a naive optimism. The song also grapples with the darker side of technological advancement.
Okay.
There's a sense of lament that despite our ability to connect across vast distances,
Right.
we haven't necessarily learned how to truly understand and empathize with each other.
That's a really interesting point. It's like we have all the tools for connection, but we're still struggling to bridge the emotional and ideological divides that separate us.
Right, and I think that tension is at the heart of Aeroplane and Radio.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing both the promise and the peril of our technological age.
It sounds like Doza Crew is really pushing us to think critically about the impact of technology on our lives
Yes.
and to consider how we can use it to foster genuine connection rather than just superficial interaction.
Absolutely, and the song goes even deeper.
Oh, wow.
Exploring the complexities of human nature itself.
Oh, okay.
There are lines about greed and envy poisoning our souls,
Oh, wow.
leading to violence and destruction.
So even though Aeroplane and Radio is more introspective and personal than the previous songs, it still touches on some of the broader themes we've been discussing. The dangers of unchecked power, the struggle for connection, and the constant battle between our better and worse impulses.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the things that makes this album so fascinating.
Yeah.
Even as the musical styles and specific themes shift, there's this underlying thread of questioning.
Right.
of challenging us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world around us.
We've covered a lot of ground with these 3 songs, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface of what this album has to offer.
I agree. We've seen satire, nationalistic fervor, and introspective contemplation all within the span of just 3 tracks.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder what other surprises Doza Crew has in store for us.
Before we dive into the next set of songs, I want to pause and ask you a question.
Okay.
From what we've heard so far, what stands out to you as particularly striking or memorable about Doza Crew's approach?
I think what strikes me most is their willingness to experiment,
Yeah.
to push boundaries both musically and thematically.
Mhm.
They're not afraid to tackle complex issues, and they do so in a way that's both thought-provoking and engaging.
Right.
They don't shy away from the darker aspects of human nature, but they also offer glimpses of hope and possibility.
And what about you, dear listener? What has resonated with you so far? What questions has this sparked for you? We'll be back in a moment to explore more of Doza Crew's Fünfneswolf.
You know, it's fascinating how they manage to weave these complex ideas into music that's so captivating.
Yeah.
Even when dealing with these darker themes,
Right.
there's a certain energy, a musicality that just keeps you hooked.
Totally. It's like they're challenging us to think critically
Right.
without sacrificing the enjoyment of the music itself.
Exactly.
Like Hüppensett, for example.
Yeah.
It's got this infectious energy.
Yes.
But the lyrics are full of these unsettling implications about blind loyalty and the potential for manipulation.
It's a really clever use of contrast.
Yeah.
The music draws you in, gets you moving, and then the lyrics hit you with these stark realities.
Right.
Makes you question how easily we can get swept up in a collective movement, even if it's headed in a dangerous direction.
And that repetition of Eder Strabnitz's Hüppensett.
Yes.
It's almost hypnotic, like a mantra that reinforces this unquestioning devotion to a leader.
Right.
It makes you think about the power of language.
Absolutely.
How certain phrases and slogans can be used to sway entire populations.
It's a subtle but powerful form of propaganda.
Yeah.
And Doza Crew captures it perfectly in that song.
Right.
They're not just analyzing it, they're recreating it musically, allowing us to experience that pull firsthand.
And I think that's what makes their approach so effective. They're not just lecturing us about the dangers of blind obedience.
Right.
They're creating a sonic experience that makes us feel those dangers viscerally.
Exactly. They're appealing to both our intellect and our emotions.
Right.
Which makes the message all the more powerful.
You know, it's interesting to think about these first 2 songs in the context of Aeroplane and Radio.
Yeah.
We go from this examination of political systems and collective ideologies to a much more personal, introspective space.
It's a fascinating shift.
Yeah.
And yet there are still threads that connect them. To Monish Tirade and Hüppensett explore the dangers of unchecked power from a societal perspective.
Right.
While Aeroplane and Radio seems to examine those same dangers on a personal level.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, think about the line, Es tut mir leid, aber ich möchte nun mal kein Herrscher der Welt sein, das liegt mir nicht. It's a rejection of the desire for dominance, a recognition of the limitations of human power.
Right.
It's almost like a direct response to the characters and ideologies we see in the first 2 songs.
That's a really insightful connection.
Yeah.
It's like Doza Crew is saying that the seeds of tyranny exist not just in political systems, but also within ourselves.
Right.
We all have the potential for greed, for envy, for the desire to control others.
And Airplane and Radio seems to suggest that the antidote to those impulses lies in introspection, in compassion, in recognizing our shared humanity. It's about connecting with each other on a deeper level, beyond the superficialities of ideology or nationalism.
It's a powerful message, especially considering how divided our world feels right now. It makes you wonder if Doza Crew is offering a path forward, a way to bridge those divides and create a more harmonious future.
I think that's one of the questions they're posing to the listener.
Yeah.
They're not providing easy answers. They're inviting us to grapple with these complexities ourselves.
You mentioned earlier that Aeroplane and Radio explores the role of technology in shaping human connection.
Yes.
I'm curious to hear more about that. Do you think they're offering a critique of technology, or is it more nuanced than that?
I think it's definitely nuanced.
Okay.
They acknowledge the ways in which technology has brought people closer together. The line, Aeroplane und Radio haben uns einander näher gebracht, is a clear example of that. But there's also this sense of disappointment, a recognition that technology hasn't solved all our problems.
Right.
We still struggle with communication, with empathy, with understanding each other's perspectives.
It's like we have all the tools for connection, but we're not always using them effectively.
Right.
We can be instantly connected to people across the globe, but we can still feel isolated and disconnected in our own communities.
And I think that's one of the challenges of our time,
Yeah.
figuring out how to use technology in a way that enhances our humanity rather than diminishes it.
It's about being mindful, intentional. It's about remembering that technology is a tool.
Right.
And like any tool, it can be for good or for ill.
I think that's a really important point. It's not about demonizing technology.
Right.
It's about recognizing its limitations and using it responsibly.
So where do we go from here? We explore the chaotic satire of Tumanish Tirade, the unsettling energy of Hüppensett,
Yes.
and the introspective beauty of Airplane and Radio. What larger themes do you see emerging from these three songs?
I think one of the most prominent themes is the tension between the individual and the collective.
Okay.
Doza Crew seems to be exploring the ways in which our individual identities are shaped by the groups we belong to, the ideologies we embrace, the systems we live under. They're also asking us to consider the responsibility we have as individuals to challenge those systems,
Right.
to resist the pull of blind obedience, and to strive for something better.
And it strikes me that there's also this underlying message of hope, even in the midst of all the darkness and chaos. Airplane and Radio, in particular, seems to suggest that even when we feel lost and disconnected,
Right.
there's always the possibility for connection, for compassion, for understanding.
I agree. There's a sense that even though the world can be a chaotic and unsettling place,
Yeah.
there's still beauty to be found, still connections to be made, still hope for a better future.
We've delved into the lyrics and the music, explored the themes, and even touched upon some personal reflections. But I'm curious, dear listener, what has resonated with you the most?
Yeah.
What images or ideas have stuck with you? Hold on to those thoughts as we're about to venture further into the world of Funknatsvelf.
It's remarkable how these three songs manage to paint such a vivid picture of this fictional world to mania. You know,
Yeah.
we see the absurdity of the regime in Tumanish Tirade, the seductive power of its propaganda in Hüppensett, and then this yearning for something more in Airplane and Radio.
It's like we've been given a glimpse into the soul of a nation, both its darkness and its potential for redemption.
And I think that's one of the things that makes Doza Crew's work so compelling. They're not just creating music, they're crafting entire worlds, complete with their own histories, ideologies, and conflicts.
It's like we're listening to a soundtrack for a revolution.
Yes.
But one that's happening on multiple levels, political, social, and personal.
That's a great way to put it, and I think Aeroplane and Radio is particularly interesting in that regard.
Oh,
It suggests that true revolution begins with the individual with a willingness to question assumptions, to challenge the status quo, and to imagine a different way of being.
There's a line that really stood out to me. Millionen verzweifelter Menschen, Opfer eines Systems, das es sich zur Aufgabe gemacht hat, Unschuldige zu quälen und in Ketten zu legen.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
It acknowledges the suffering inflicted by oppressive regimes,
Right.
but it also hints at the possibility of resistance, of breaking free from those chains.
It's a powerful message of hope amidst the despair.
Yeah.
It suggests that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can endure, and that the desire for freedom and justice can never be fully extinguished.
And it seems like Doza Crew is suggesting that technology can play a role in that struggle for liberation. Aeroplane and Radio celebrates the connecting power of these inventions while also acknowledging their potential for misuse.
Right. It's about recognizing that technology is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for evil.
Right.
It's up to us to decide how we wield that power.
I think the line, diese Erfindungen haben eine Brücke geschlagen von Mensch zu Mensch, sie erfordern eine umfassende Brüderlichkeit, damit wir alle eins werden, really encapsulates that idea.
Yeah.
Technology can bring us together, but it's up to us to build the bridges of understanding and compassion that will allow us to truly connect.
It's a call to action, a reminder that we have a responsibility to use technology in a way that benefits all of humanity, not just a select few.
And that responsibility extends beyond our use of technology.
All right.
It's about examining our own biases, challenging our own assumptions, and actively working to create a more just and equitable world.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected, that our actions have consequences, and that we have the power to make a difference.
So as we reach the end of our deep dive into these three tracks from Finternosvelf, what would you say is the ultimate takeaway for our listeners? What message is Doza Crew trying to convey through their music?
I think they're challenging us to wake up, to pay attention to the world around us, and to recognize the ways in which we're all complicit in the systems that perpetuate injustice and inequality.
They're also urging us to tap into our own humanity, to cultivate empathy and compassion, and to use our voices and our actions to create a better world.
And I think they're reminding us that even in the face of overwhelming challenges, there's always hope. The
Right.
human spirit is resilient, and our capacity for love, for connection, for creativity is ultimately what will lead us towards a brighter future.
It's a powerful message, and one that I think resonates deeply in our current global climate. So to our listeners, we encourage you to explore the full album, Hüppensett, and draw your own conclusions. Let Doza Cruz music be a catalyst for critical thinking, meaningful conversations, and a renewed commitment to creating a more just and equitable world.
Remember, the power to shape a better future lies within each of us. Let's use it wisely.
And that concludes our deep dive into the world of Doza Crew. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep diving deep.